no, December 17th edition of On Track Live. We appreciate everybody taking the time in this holiday season to join us for today's webinar. As always, we record these sessions and post the recordings on the members only website at NCTA. So if it ever is inconvenient for you to attend these, you can always go back and view them afterwards. Appreciate everybody taking time from, the holidays seem to be coming very fast right now. So for those of you who did decide to join us today, we really appreciate that. I've got the chat box open and we'll be watching for that. If you'd like to put in any questions, or you can always do the raising handy thingy and join the conversation if you'd like to. We're just going to dive right into it today because I'm very excited to have a distinguished guest with us this month. Llewellyn King is a journalist who has worked on 3 continents and has been around a lot of issues of interest to NCTA and its members for a very long time. Llewellyn also has a program on PBS called White House Chronicle. You can be viewed either on your local PBS stations, or there's a Vimeo channel that has all of the back issues or the back editions of that program. They get into some very interesting topics on a wide variety of subjects. So I was excited that Llewellyn was able to accept our invitation to be here today and just have kind of a little bit of a wide-ranging conversation about what's going on in energy and environmental markets and the things that affect those. So really like to just dive right in. Llewellyn, you've been an observer of energy markets and technologies for a long time now. It feels like we're living through some extraordinary times right now, but are we really? I mean, how does the current energy world compare to some of the past energy crises like the 1970s oil embargoes or the creation of EPA and enactment of regulatory things like that? I mean, are we in extraordinary times, and how does it compare to the past?
I think we're in extraordinary times, John, and thank you for inviting me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with the group today. We are in extraordinary times, but they're not analogous to what happened in 1973 and which continued essentially all the way through the 70s and much of the 80s as new upsets occurred. This is rather different. This is a progressive turning from various ways of doing things to using electricity. And electricity is in huge demand. It is the quintessential, the absolute, the essential new product going forward. It has been for a long time, but it has gotten a new urgency with the development of artificial intelligence and with a huge swing to the use of electricity rather than the use directly of fossil fuels, particularly in transportation. And when we think of transportation, we tend to get a little bit narrow-minded and think of whether we are driving a gasoline car or an electric car or a hybrid. But the fact is that commercial fleets are very rapidly turning to electricity. By the end of the decade, at least half the delivery vehicles in the big fleets, and you know who they are, the post office, FedEx, UPS, are going to be electric, particularly for in-city deliveries, for intra-city deliveries. Intercity, that may take a little longer. That requires a different, really different regime, a much longer duration of the ability of a vehicle to move without charging, but it's coming. School buses are coming. So the pressure on electricity is tremendous, leaving out this whole new world of data centers. And data centers are extraordinary, both in their voracious consumption of electricity and in their dynamic taking over of so much of the earth. data centers consume a lot of electricity. They also consume a lot of acreage. And if we stayed on a graph line going up like this, it would take over half the electricity made in the country. Well, I don't believe that'll happen. I believe that we will engineer ways so that we use less electricity in each AI operation. At the moment, if you ask a question on Google, you say 1. If you ask it through any of the chat boxes, including Google's own, suddenly it's 10. It's 10 times more electricity to answer a query with AI, and that accounts for the huge drive in data centers, the huge thirst for electricity. Texas is the hardest hit, followed by Virginia. And I say hardest hit in that they have the most data centers. Now, the electric utility companies themselves are both excited to get the new load, easily to serve, steady, constant demand, very good revenue, but they also are at a loss to generate or to procure the power they'll need to answer this new load. And so we're going to have a very difficult period. The projections are all over the lot. They go to double the electricity by 2050 to something more reasonable, maybe just a 50% increase, or half of that. So take your choice. I looked at them all, the EIA, some of the private ones. There are a lot of unknowns. My own thought, and it's only a thought, is that we will get better engineering in the data centers and they'll use less electricity. They're already going to water and away from electricity for cooling, and that's a big difference. There's still electric hogs, but less so. And at one point, we may get a totally different chip, a photon chip, which would use no electricity. And suddenly, the data centers will not be the electric sumps they are at the present time. Meanwhile, it's exciting, it's dramatic, and it's very scary.
Yeah, it raises a really interesting question for those of us who were around, in the 70s and 80s. I mean, the response to the obviously as you've explained, it's a different set of circumstances, but the response to the energy shocks of the 70s was embarking on a huge plan of building new power plants. And once we got into that, some of that load disappeared, and all of a sudden, where we were planning to build, 4 big coal plants, only 2 of them got built, and that experience was repeated in a lot of places. Do you think that's going to happen with the AI and transportation demand? Or is it just so big that we're still going to have to build a lot of stuff?
We're still going to have to build a lot of stuff, and we've got to retire a lot of stuff, which has reached the end of its design life. Some of the coal plants that are still operating, even some of the nuclear plants. Now, nuclear plants you can refurbish and keep them going. Some will shortly be licensed to 100 years if you trace it back to when they got their original operating permits. But it's a new order of demand and a new order of supplying that demand. We're not going to go back to what we did. I worked on a study for President Nixon in 1974. And to be honest, my colleague did most of the heavy lifting, and I wrote the executive summary and asked the questions and tried to poke holes in his work. But we had a dismal outcome. All we could find was coal and nuclear, and there was just beginning an opposition movement to nuclear, which means that we had coal, coal, and coal. And so our study said we have to electrify everything. We never did, but we called for the electrifying the railroads, electrifying all transportation, and there were no electric. There were electric vehicles, but there were no electric vehicles that were competitive. And of course, Jimmy Carter, when he came along, believed that we had to use coal in other ways as well, that we had to liquefy it as a motor fuel, gasify it, for all the uses we use natural gas for. And I'll take a minute, if you've got time, to go back in the history of natural gas. In 1977, something around that, the fledgling Department of Energy announced that gas was a depleted resource. I sent a reporter from the Energy Daily, which I had founded 5 years earlier, over to a press conference run by Jack O'Leary, the first Deputy Secretary of Energy. And when he asked about gas, O'Leary turned on and said, "Richard, it's a depleted resource. It's over, finished. Don't ask stupid questions." So beware of anybody who tells you that something is absolute. Well, along came a lot of things, not one thing. First of all, the Reagan administration did a manful job in deregulating gas. We had a regulatory nightmare with gas. We had interstate gas, we had intrastate gas, we had what we called at the Energy Daily homogeneous gas, which we couldn't decide what it was, and neither could the gas companies. And, you know, obviously gas doesn't have a nameplate on it. But he deregulated the market. So gas began to flow. And then we had this enormous convulsion, which was the arrival of a bunch of technologies more or less simultaneously, give or take a few years, and they were all in their way very dramatic. 3D seismic, horizontal drilling, a new drill bit, and fracking. Well, fracking wasn't new. Fracking had been around the oil and gas industries for some time, but what we had was the horizontal drilling and a new fracking fluid. The thing you put down the hole to cause the rock to go. And the combination of these worked wonderfully, plus one other major technology evolution. That was the arrival, although it wasn't new, but of the jet engine as an electricity generator. Basically, the aeroderivative turbine, which was a jet engine on the ground, and the people making them to this day are still the people who make aircraft engines, or some of them, Rolls-Royce, General Electric, United Technologies, etc. All of these things came together, and gas went from being a depleted, don't ask questions about it, no good whatsoever, to the savior, the fuel of choice. And it is a wonderful fuel. And we have plenty of it. Fracking has really worked. We have probably the best geology for fracking. Not every country can jump down and frack and get gas out of its formations, but we can, and we have, and it's changed the picture. In the Chesapeake Bay, and this is very typical, is a gas terminal where exports head out every day. It was built to receive liquefied natural gas from the Gulf because we didn't have enough, and its role has been reversed. The little moral of this tale is nothing is absolute. Technology changes things.
Yeah. What do you see as, I mean, use your crystal ball for a minute, assuming that all of these impressive demand forecasts, even if some of them stick, we've got to build a lot more things. I mean, could you handicap the environment? I mean, what do you think about small modular nuclear? I mean, can we build enough gas turbines? Where are all these electrons going to come from?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is to manage the current supply better. And artificial intelligence is going to be a huge help. We have, obviously, DER, demand side management, along with some other technologies. So we have the so-called virtual power plant, which is really making good use of what you've got. It also brings the homeowner with, if you have a power wall and you have a collector on the roof, you're in business. A photovoltaic system plus a battery. Bringing these into play is going to make a big difference. Whether it is enough, who can say? But in the interim, DER I beg your pardon, energy resources is going to make the difference. And I've talked to utility heads and say they think it can be anywhere from 5 to 10 to even 15 on their systems, depending on how much slack there is in the system. It is not a total solution. What we have, if we look out at the moment, is the cheapest new source of electricity is probably wind, closely followed by solar, followed by natural gas, followed by coal, and followed by new nuclear. Old nuclear tends to be competitive with coal. Old nuclear is very important. A lot of plants that were mothballed or abandoned may come back into service. Small modular reactors are an unknown quantity. There's a lot of enthusiasm for them, but the expectations of them are unproved. The first is they're going to be built in factories, and they're going to therefore be cheaper, and the power will be cheaper. None of that's been proved. In fact, the power so far looks as though it may be more expensive because you've got first of a kind, and first of a kind is always expensive, or nearly always. I think you could say 90% of the time or higher. First of a kind is more expensive. We also have to decide which of maybe 30 small modular reactors that are being developed we're actually going to use. I would put my money on the Hitachi GE reactor because of the parentage, the resources, and because the Tennessee Valley Authority has gotten behind it. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily the winner. It is unlikely that you can develop 3 or 5 even new reactors. We didn't do it with light water. We had various light water reactors that didn't do the job, and pressurized water did the job, either boiling water or simple pressurized water. We abandoned gas. We abandoned various kinds of gas reactors. The British, for example, had a thing called the Magnox, followed by the Advanced Gas Reactor, the AGR, and in the end, they had to come down and build a Westinghouse pressurized water reactor, which was reliable. In Trump's intentions for the future, or where he has put his thumb on the scale, I think the best thing he has proposed is building 8 more large 1,000-megawatt type reactors, somewhat like Vogtle 4. The Vogtle situation in Georgia on the Southern Company system has been very challenging. The first Vogtle 3, there are 2 operating reactors, and this was 3, was very expensive. Westinghouse went bankrupt in the middle of it. Supply chain issues were huge, including human supply, a lack of it. By the time they got around to doing Vogtle 4, things had settled down, and the cost overruns, although still substantial, were not as out of sight as they were on Unit 3. So I think you can build on Unit 4, and I think the president is right wanting to build a lot of those reactors because it's proven technology. We need the power, and we have the infrastructure for it. We do still have a huge shortage of skilled workers, which is a big inhibition, and we don't have that many companies that can build reactors anymore. The basic US fleet was built by 4 vendors. Now there are new vendors for small modular reactors, but of the old type of reactors, there are basically 2 vendors left, in my view, and that's General Electric and Westinghouse. So it's a very fluid situation. I would not look to small modular reactors or even new nuclear plants to make that much of a difference. The cheap new power is renewables, despite the fact that the administration has set hard against them. It's still the cheapest power, and there is an awful lot of potential renewables waiting in the queue to get transmission. And that's a big issue. If you can't move it, then you're going to have to use it where it's made. And there isn't a lot of demand where the wind blows. But for, say, coal, might want to look to the future of and not mine mouth plants, but plants very close to the load. We also have a new dynamic, and that is people who want to build power plants who are not traditional electric utilities. Basically, the big tech companies, the owners of these hyperscalers who want the electricity. Initially, they said, we'll only take high quality green electricity, solar, and now they'll take anything they can get. They're a little less fussy than they were. If we're going to see any future in coal, and I don't think we're going to get much as a result of the presidential enthusiasm for it, coal needs a technical breakthrough, a technological breakthrough, the way gas got one with the aeroderivative turbine. It's probably in carbon capture. If an inexpensive, reliable form of carbon capture can be developed, coal has a future. Otherwise, I think it's gradually going to fade away. It's still about 20% of our generation. That is not inconsiderable. It's more or less level with nuclear. So when you think of that, coal is still very important, but it is declining in political enthusiasm outside of the administration, and the utilities are not enthusiastic. You have this situation with whatever the prevailing federal regime is, utilities work on a 30-year time frame. Coal, they fear opening new mines or new coal plants with old mines, that they will end up with stranded assets. The best use of coal probably is to export it to countries that need it. It's a huge item in international trade. I don't see that we're going to see a resurgence in coal in the US unless we get a technological breakthrough, something which is going to make it different.
Yeah. Do you see any players out there who are working on that technological breakthrough? And
I'm sure there are. I don't personally know. There's in Wyoming, they're looking to build a new coal plant, which will have the purpose of chemical extraction, not of power generation. That's an interesting development. It's an interesting future for coal, but it's not going to revive totally the future coal. Coal needs something. I'm not sure who's working on it. I'm sure there are. But so far it's been very resistant. We had small development, circulating fluidized beds and such. And in the 70s and 80s, coal was the golden fuel. King Coal was back and he was on his throne and he was going to stay there for all time. So it's very difficult and dangerous to predict that kind of thing. Remember, gas was dead, coal was the only thing we had, and nobody liked nuclear because they worried about nuclear waste, they worried about proliferation. Those issues are still there, but nobody's worrying with the same intensity about them.
On the wind and solar front, which are gaining economies of scale advantages now, but still have to deal with the intermittency of the resource. I mean, do you see advancements coming in the energy storage side that makes wind and solar more attractive?
Not only, John, are they coming, they're coming daily. Batteries are infinitely better than they were 5 years ago. There are new technologies. There are flow batteries. There are iron air batteries. But even so, the longer durations, longer drawdown times, faster recharging times. Batteries are getting better, and they're now making a huge difference in the year-round viability of the utility. Both the president of the California Independent System Operator and the equivalent in Texas, ERCOT, both the presidents have told me they got through last winter because of battery storage. Batteries are enormously important, and smart people are really investing science as well as investing money in batteries. That has been the breakthrough, but because it didn't come with one big bang, because it was evolutionary, it's not always recognized. And the smartest people I know are now great believers in batteries, because you don't have you remember some of the phrases, negawatts, the duck curve, etc. Too much electricity at noon, none at 5 o'clock, or certainly none at 7 o'clock, or the wind comes up at night and not much in the day, and the wind tends to drop almost when the evening peak starts. But batteries change that. It smooths it out. There are downsides. I mean, nothing is without its price. And you have a lot of, you need a lot of water with solar to clean them, to keep them going. You need a lot of land. It's often prime agricultural land if you're going to build them at scale. It's all right if you're putting them on rooftops. If you're building solar farms at scale, you're going to chew up a lot of land, which is in fact what is going on. And windmills are windmills. They kill birds and they have a visual impact. Now, I happen to think 3 or 4 here in Rhode Island down on the docks in Providence, I think there's 7 windmills, and they look lovely. They fit with the industrial nature of that area. But when you see them, say, down Route 10 in California, rows of them, it's very hard to take. Or when you see them on an Irish hillside, a sort of eternal Irish hill, and these bloody windmills are spoiling the poetic nature of the hill. And there are no free lunches. There are better lunches and there are worse lunches, and the menu changes.
That's excellent. Let me ask just a couple of questions real quick about, obviously we've seen some policy whiplash with the Trump administration, Trump 2.0. They're obviously moving very fast on environmental reform, permitting reform, the energy dominance agenda associated. What are you seeing? What's your opinion on how durable the things the Trump administration is trying to accomplish now will be?
If it succeeds with some of the acceleration permitting, that is, everybody's agreed that permitting has become a nightmare of long delays, year after year after year. Probably some curtailment of the drag of NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. But it also is the fundamental law of the land when it comes to environment, and it should be treated carefully. I think remarkably little. I think permitting will improve, but you have tension between the federal agenda and state agendas. The resource planning in most states does not allow for an increase in coal, for example, does not allow for a diminution of the amount of wind. So there is a clash set up. And take any state with a high environmental sensitivity. Colorado comes to mind. Colorado's resource plan is at odds with the federal resource declarations. And this is true in lots of places. Now, nobody wants to be in a fight with Trump. And utilities are, if not running scared, they're running cautious. They really do like wind. They quite like solar. Wind and solar have their largest footprints in Texas, which is a natural gas and oil state. So the utilities are hunkering down, trying not to be offensive, and doing what they think they have to do on their 30-year time horizons. I don't think we're going to see, for example, a lot of coal as we have known it. Now, there are things you can do with coal. You can gasified, as I mentioned earlier. There was a long-running program out of Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory to gasify coal in situ. We may see some of those things revisited. I fear that the administration's idea of coal is coal to steam, a boiler, a fire, and water. It's going to be more sophisticated than that if coal is going to come back as a primary fuel. And we have a lot of it. If you just look at the resource, it's larger than oil, it's larger than gas. It is the largest fossil resource we have. It's coal. But as somebody said, the Bronze Age didn't stop because we ran out of copper. We moved forward. I feel for the coal industry, and I hope that we can get a very effective, inexpensive decarbonization, because that would seem to be the answer. We also have problems with coal, as we do the tail. Nuclear has the nuclear waste tail. Coal has the coal ash tail. There are a lot of environmentally sensitive coal ash ponds scattered across the country, and some utilities have had particular problems containing those ponds. Duke, for example. You're never sure in a world of such sudden technological change. And technologies come, and technologies have about them a kind of imperial quality. They shoulder their way into the market. It's an interesting phenomenon. And new technologies are what we're looking to keep the supply of electricity growing. And it's got to grow very fast. The big problem, I asked utility heads all the time, what keeps you awake at night? And they used to tell me cybersecurity. Now they tell me weather. Here's another disagreement that the utilities have, but that they do not make a point of with the federal government, is they deal with aberrant weather every year now. And it's a huge problem for them. The federal government has said there's no such thing, but the utilities know there is such a thing because they have the cold and the heat and the wildfires and the other excesses, the floods, etc., to deal with. And so in a way, I think the utility industry is not keen to pick a fight with the federal government, but hopes, I think, to wait it out.
Yeah. On your discussion of the the advancement of technologies as well too. So many of these new technologies depend on the critical minerals, the rare earth elements, and that sort of thing. Do you see there's an effort to reshore production of those kind of resources here in America? Do you see that coming to fruition?
That may be one of the lasting good things coming out of this administration, because they certainly are encouraging mining. Now, we don't have absolutely, as people keep saying, rare earths aren't rare, but getting them is a rare, difficult undertaking. Processing them, even rare earths mined in Australia tend to be processed in China. So we have to find the rare earths. We've been inhibited to this point in time by thorium. Thorium is fertile but not fissile nuclear material, and the government has always, the NRC, has classified it as a nuclear material. So it has to be, when you mine it inadvertently, and in the US it's found in conjunction with rare earths. So you have it, you have to treat it as a nuclear material, not as something you put on a slag heap, but something which you somehow impound. And that's had a tremendously deleterious impact. And it's a problem that needs to be solved if we're going to find the rare earths in the US we need. I think we probably will end up finding them around the world. But meanwhile, we are in an extraordinarily vulnerable situation in relation to China. And China, let me say this quickly, because I don't believe in the inevitability of war with China. We've never seen a situation where two major powers were so interdependent. China needs our market, and we need some things that China has. China, we are very good, and here's another very delicate issue. Are we cutting too much research? Have some of the Trump administration actions, particularly with the National Science Foundation and the Department of Energy, cut too much of the funding, or the way they have treated the research universities? We have always kept ahead by inventing ourselves ahead of everybody. But China is much better at going to scale quickly. Their decision-making, and it's not, I've been doing as much reporting at a distance as is possible for me to do, and my reporting says that there's a lot less central direction of the economy in China than we tend to think, that there's a lot of local autonomy, and that gives them a certain sort of flexibility. Now, they make mistakes, things go wrong, they're not perfect. And you started our conversation today looking for analogous situations with the energy crisis. Well, it's, some of this is analogous with what we did in the late 80s and the 90s with Japan, where Japan looked as though it was invincible. The Japanese were coming. A rather foolish Japanese member of the Japanese cabinet said, oh, in the 21st century, America will be our factory and Europe our garden. And then they committed a kind of Smoot-Hawley suicide on themselves. And that's not been the case. But China is very large, very talented. They are very gifted people, and they're very good at manufacturing. I mean, the great question is how they did it so fast. I'm a native of Africa. I was born and grew up in Africa, and Africa is difficult. And dealing with the structure in Africa is very difficult, and yet China has done amazing things. And I just look at China and say, where did you get the managerial class? It came from somewhere. I was living in an annex of the Windsor Park Hotel in Washington when the hotel itself was taken over to be the Chinese embassy. And these people were unsophisticated. Their suits didn't fit. They didn't know how to behave in restaurants. Now they're as sophisticated as any diplomats on the face of the earth. It has been one of the fastest transformations. It has also been an astounding conversion of the poor into the rich, and at least into a very reliable, very dependable workforce. And it's no good saying rude things about the Chinese. They're a force in nature now, as are we. And we keep our lead by keeping our borders open, bringing in talent as we always have. And any look at history will see how floods of talent have made a difference. For some reason, I've been interested recently in how movies are made. I don't want to be a movie star. I don't want to direct a movie, but I'm just interested. I started my journalistic career partly as a theater critic. And the impact of the Jewish German film executives in the 1930s gave us Hollywood. It wasn't just the sunshine in California, it was the talent. And if you're excluding talent, you pay a price for it. If you introduce rigidities into a society, you pay a price for it. The marvelous thing about the US to this point has been time is that when there have been rigidities, we've gotten rid of them. We managed to get rid of them. Our strengths have been our talent, our openness, our preparedness to try, our preparedness to say why not, to give it a go, and I would add mobility of labor. We are people who, when there were jobs in California, we went to California. When there were jobs in Texas, we went to Texas. Some of that is eroding, and particularly oddly, the housing shortage is affecting the mobility of labor. People can't go where they want to go automatically because they know they won't have a house or won't be able to buy one or even afford to rent one. So there are a lot of forces at work here, but the key, the essentialist, is electricity. Electricity has assumed, it's always been important in the last 100 years, but suddenly it has assumed a position of even greater significance and is critical to the well-being of any nation now.
Fascinating how all of these factors come together. We're starting to run up against the end of our time. I encourage anyone, if you've got a question for Llewellyn, please feel free to speak up or put it into the chat box. Before we let you go, Llewellyn, and we very much appreciate you taking your time, and this perspective is extremely valuable to those of us who are kind of in the trenches. You do a lot of work with the U.S. Energy Association, which I think is an organization that our NCTA members are probably not as familiar with as they should be. Can you give us a little background of what goes on over there?
Yeah. The U.S. Energy, thank you for the question. I'm not formally part of the USEA, but I've worked with them for 50 years. And they were formed in 1924, so it's their 100th year. And their job is basically to tell people that energy is good for them. They don't favor one fuel over another. They don't favor oil over electricity, although their genesis was as part of the World Energy Council, which was very largely at that time dedicated to electricity in 1924. It was rather a new concept in most parts of the world, or certainly it was a period of great expansion. And they continue, they fell into a very critical role with the US government. And when the Berlin Wall came down, the utilities in Eastern Europe didn't know anything about a free market economy. They didn't know how to charge. They didn't have meters. They didn't, and all of this they had to learn and learn very quickly. And the USEA fortuitously stepped into that hole, into that need, and created a series of relationships, introducing American utilities to European utilities for a transfer of knowledge. Executives from the American engineers, always engineers are so critical. Engineers would go to Europe and work for a year or 2 years in the European Union, Czechoslovakia, as it was then, the Czech Republic now. Likewise, some of their engineers would come and work in American utilities. Unfortunately, this was financed by, and it was a very small part of the money, because most of the money was provided by the American and then later by the European, and not just European. It ended up going on in 104 countries with the sudden closing of USAID, which was the instrument of this for the USEA as a contractor to USAID. And that's been a mortal, not a mortal, but a very substantial blow to USEA. They also had some contracts with DOE. But they're very important in bringing fuels together. They don't lobby. They basically say, energy is good for you. Can we help? And that has been really unique. They're not a trade association. They're more or less a think tank, but they wouldn't even go that far. They don't do huge studies, but they do put on a lot of informational programs. I do a monthly virtual press conference for them. I call it a virtual press briefing, in which I get some really senior reporters, the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Reuters, AP, etc., questioning people in the industry on important subjects. These have included small modular reactors, fracking, permit reform. And I've done this for some years. They have a genesis that goes back further when I did breakfast in conjunction with USEA. But obviously, Zoom has made many things, including our wonderful time together today, possible.
That's great. You mentioned the USAID losing the funding and so forth. I believe your PBS program, which I greatly enjoy and was one of the main reasons I was excited to have you here today, the White House Chronicle. I think you were a victim of some of those funding cuts too, weren't you?
Indirectly, yes. A lot of our sponsors have lost federal funding. I never got direct federal funding. So right at the moment, our principal sponsor is myself, and that is not a very good situation. We do need a sponsor, and we'd really love to have one.
Well, we here at NCTA
are brand out.
Yeah, we here at NCTA are big fans of shameless self-promotion. So, let's go ahead and throw that out there for folks who may be interested or folks who may have connections that how would one go about I guess I can introduce
folks, but how would one go about
being a Chronicle sponsor?
Yeah. John, just get in touch with me.
Excellent. Well, we'll see what we can do to beat the bushes for some support, because it is an outstanding program.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Llewellyn, it's been a pleasure talking to you. It's great to get a bigger picture of the world. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to sum up with before we break today?
Well, yes, I will. It's something I've said before, and that is how fortunate people who work in energy are, because what we do is palpably good for people. And not every job is that true of. When I started the Energy Daily, the second publication I started in my publishing in Washington was Defense Week. And there was a different tenor, because, defense is not, it's critical, but it's not the same as energy. It's not, you're not actually aware of helping people. If you produce energy, you help people. I got this idea of looking at particularly electricity through the "are you helping people" lens when I asked an ophthalmologist once. I said, I've known a lot of ophthalmologists. You are all quite cheerful. Why? And he said, well, mostly we help people and they are glad, and we feel. Now, some people go blind, but not very many. Very tiny percentage of the people who come in here go blind. Mostly they can't read, so we give them some eyeglasses. They got something, we take it out. They're glad, we're glad. And I think that's also true in the energy business, because I find the esprit in energy is fabulous. Of my staff, most of whom over the 33 years I was publishing, most of them went on to great things, particularly off defense. None of them stayed in defense. The energy people, and they went to great things. I mean that, the Washington Post, Associated Press, New York Times, etc. The energy people all stayed in energy. It is a very satisfying place. And I think it's because fundamentally, and I'm a bit Pollyanna-ish here, because I think it's good for people.
Thank you, Llewellyn. We couldn't agree more. And thank you so much for taking the time today to share your perspective and your expertise. We very much appreciate it. I've got a couple ideas for the White House Chronicle. I'll be back in touch on that. So
thank you, John.
You bet.
And thank you all so much for attending. You do me an honor, and I hope in some small way I've been able to discharge it.
Thank you so much for sharing. We will be just to let everyone know, we will be back next month in January. In January, we're going to have some folks from Energy Ventures Analysis on with us to talk about the new study that they've just produced, comparing the costs of extending the life of some of these coal plants to development of new technologies. It's a very interesting study, so we'll go into some depth on that in January. And then Melinda, anything Yeah. Oh, Tony, did you have Tony? I just saw a piece. Tony, speak up if you got a question for Will Allen before we break here. We got a couple of
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah. Sorry, I put my questions in the read AI thing here, but
Oh, okay. I missed that. Sorry.
yeah, no, that's my fault. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for your talk. But I work with Wood Mackenzie and I cover thermal coal markets globally. But I noticed the DOE announced another extension of a coal plant today. So in Centralia, it's actually a plant I used to work at. But is it more obviously? I think through your talk, I think I understand where this is going to go. But is it more flag waving for the Trump coal policy, or is it a necessary means to an end? So
I haven't seen it, so I'm not sure.
no, it just came out like an hour ago. So
Yeah, it was.
Well,
So I
my
think we're on
ignorance
the way.
can be
Yeah,
excused.
the way you could.
I would not be too hopeful. What, as I said much earlier, Tony, what I think the DOE could do to help coal is to really push clean coal technologies. Now, in the past, clean coal has sometimes meant washing coal, or there's been a lot of greenwashing around coal, but truly technologies that make it acceptable in today's world of reduced carbon. And I think that could make all the difference. And I don't think it's an impossible challenge. We have the great national laboratories, 17 Department of Energy national labs. I think if the administration really wanted to save coal, it would give them a mandate to go out and find ways of reducing the environmental impact of coal. And if you could do that, and I throw out, because the only thing I can think of is carbon capture, but if you can do something about that, then coal becomes very viable. And there are many communities which would be very grateful to see coal. It's true in Wyoming, it's true in West Virginia, it's true in Pennsylvania, they're great coal producing. But we haven't seen a technology which suggests that it has a green future. And fundamentally, we're going to go for technologies that have a green future. And it's that simple.
Yeah, I agree. Well, there's some advances in China with CCUS. I think they have the largest CCUS plant right now. My home country has boundary dam, but yeah, I think there's some room for that. But I think there are technologies coming out that are looking to move away from the pulverized coal type, fire steam.
That's interesting. I'd love to hear about them, Tony. Be in touch, please.
Yeah, there's a new plant we learned about, a new technology. So yeah, I'll get the email. So that
absolutely. John can give you my email, or if anybody wants my email, it's llewellynking1@gmail.com.
Oh, somebody stole your original. There's another Llewellyn King somewhere.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that. Melinda, do you have anything that okay, terrific. Well, just keeping in mind with shameless self-promotion, don't forget everybody, we'll be together in April this year for the spring and O&M conferences. Jekyll Island, beautiful spot. Looking forward to seeing everyone there for that. But again, Llewellyn, thank you so much for taking the time. We'll be back in touch with some ideas and very much appreciate your perspective today. So
thank you for having me.
Thank you. Take care.